Tout le monde. Hello everybody. Nous allons être de retour à 11 heures en français. Ceci est en anglais. So welcome everyone to a Tuesday live with myself, Nicole de Brassard. And in regards to our rights to collective self-determination, for all the Canadians and Indigenous peoples to be placed above our government and to have final say in all of what happens within this country, within the laws and our natural resources, because those are the rights that were stolen from us back in 1982. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with this message, allow people to give them a chance to log in, and we'll be right back.
Nicole Le Brasseur, a dedicated legal researcher with over 15 years of experience, proudly serves as the founder and CEO of the Canadian People's Union NFP. Alongside her on the board of directors are Denis Lamothe, CFO, and Barb Garlow, a respected director and member of the Six Nations. Together, they stand united in their mission at the CPU, an organization unlike any other, representing informed Canadian citizens and Indigenous peoples from coast to coast. The CPU's goal is simple yet profound: to challenge the status quo and advocate for our collective civil and political rights reclamation, a legacy eroded by political oversight and global pressures. Today, we at the CPU seek to ignite a spark of change, progress, and a reimagined democracy. Our mission is to illuminate the role of citizens within our political system, expose the international principles Canada has neglected, and introduce a viable solution for reform. The core of our critique lies in the partocracy system, a 19th century political framework where power resides with parties over citizens. This system has failed to evolve with societal needs, overshadowing citizens' voices with party interests. Additionally, despite the passage into the 21st century, Canada's status as an undecolonized constitutional monarchy starkly contrasts with the principles of a true democracy, where citizens should be collective sovereigns and actively participate in decision-making processes. We propose a transformative shift towards true democracy, prioritizing the collective voice and ensuring adherence to national and international human rights laws, a sector alarmingly ignored by our current leaders. Canada must fulfill its commitments to the conventions, treaties, statutes, and the International Bill of Rights, including the Syracuse and Johannesburg Principles. These frameworks, demanding that restrictions on freedoms be lawful, necessary, proportionate, and non-discriminatory, are foundational yet overlooked in our domestic policies, leading to confusion, unnecessary spending, and detrimental health outcomes, to name a few. The disparity between our international promises and domestic practices calls for immediate action. As Canadians, we must bridge this gap for legal compliance and to uphold democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. The CPU stands ready to lead this charge, advocating for Canada to become a global beacon of justice and human dignity. At this crossroads, we demand the opportunity to redefine governance to truly serve the people. The Powershift to Freedom project represents a crucial step towards embedding our collective rights firmly within our Constitution, shifting political power back to citizens and Indigenous peoples. This shift is not just a dream, it's a necessity, and we need your passion, voice, and commitment to democracy to make it happen. Your engagement is vital. Join us by endorsing the Convention of Consent, a living document that becomes legally binding with the support of 51% of citizens in 7 provinces. This convention is a step towards a brighter, more democratic future where past injustices are lessons learned, not repeated. Citizens 15 years old and over can sign at the cpu.ca. Together, we can usher in a new era of governance where corruption and unaccountability are relics of the past and our rights are protected and cherished. Let's make this vision a reality.
And we're back. So, anyways, I like to play that video so that the newcomers can, at least try to understand what we do here at the CPU. And it's all about our rights and being in charge of our own governance, which was denied to us. And it's kind of ironic that the United States and France, who were supposed to be for the people, also got duped. Okay. And I almost have I almost have to laugh when I read this, this thing about the United States. And everything was done on the presumption of the meanings, right? Within the amendments of the United States, and it was the power to the people. And in France, while it was the power, they started it first before the United States. The United States kind of followed the people from France. So, anyways, in France, it was the people had the power and to dictate what their government was going to do. But then they ended up in a war, and then they handed over all the power to Napoleon. So he became an emperor. He made himself an emperor. So, anyways, then it went back down to control again. But in the United States, it never their constitution is there, their 10th Amendment is there, but it's read wrongly. Okay, I'm just going to hang on a minute here because there's something that's really irking me. My video keeps going back and forth, and it's making me actually dizzy. I'm just going to go and fix something here. Okay. Actually, I'm gonna never mind it. I'll do it after. So, anyways, the one of the phrases here is that in the interpretation of the 10th Amendment in the United States, excuse me, the court's current interpretation of the 10th Amendment rests on a presumption that balancing powers between the states and a national government protects the people. Well, the government protects the people, mind you. They're depopulating. And the United States actually admitted to it that they finally reached their depopulation numbers in 2021. I wonder why. I have a video to that effect. Someday I'll show you. But you can find it on YouTube. You can do a search. Depopulation 2021 United States. So, anyways, to keep going here, it says that the government is, protects the people. As Justice Scalia explained, the power surrendered by the people is first divided between two distinct governments. Hence, security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments will control each other. This argument asks the people to trust that their interests will be protected by two admittedly power-hungry governments, or else trust that the states will be the champions of the people by speaking for them as their closest representatives. Unfortunately, history, especially the Jim Crow South, has, that's a court case, has proven state governments are capable of doing quite the opposite, silencing their citizens in order to stay in power. And that's exactly what's happening here in Canada. Okay, because we're going to go to what the RCMP and afraid politicians are trying to do. Total totalitarianism. It's by stealth. It's by creating laws against us and making sure that we have no power. But our power was stolen in 1982 when it should have been made official. So here it says, in the pages that follow, I offer several arguments for how the 10th Amendment preserves the separate powers of the people. So, anyways, this document here is about how they can argue it in court. But because the courts have only been arguing that the power belongs to the states in the United States and to the federal government. So, the national government, federal government, whatever you want to call it. But We're the people. Well, it's we the people, right? Well, what happened to the people? Well, the government subverted it. How? Through courts. And what I explained last time, the same thing happened to the indigenous peoples here in regards to their lands and their rights. And now they're doing it to us as well. And they're doing it, and Canada is the number one country showing other countries how to do it. Okay, now this needs to stop. It needs to stop worldwide, needs to stop here. And that's what the CPU is about. That's what we've been working at, is how did they do this? Why did they do it? Again, who gets to sit at the table with the governments? Over 170 big corporations in Canada. They get to sit with CSIS on security of the nation. Where do the people get to sit with CSIS to talk about security? Little meetings that they say they're going to have online and you can register, but nobody knows about. Just like trying to get rid of Charles last year. An MP made a petition, but they made sure nobody knew about it other than 710 people across Canada. If we would have known about it, but we can't check everything every single day because there's too much to do, too much to check, too much being done. So we need the people to help. And the CPU can't do anything. And we've said that from the get-go. We will never succeed at anything unless we have you, the people, with us. Because that's what it takes. And until Canadians and Indigenous nations understand this fact and actually act upon it, we will never have our rights recognized. We will keep losing this country. They are turning us into a third world country, bringing in Afghans by the thousands and all kinds of other people at war with each other in this country to be more at war with each other. And we're seeing this throughout Canada right now. So how do we handle this? Yeah, sure. People need to have a decent place to live and a good country. But right now, Canada is only setting up all of the Canadians and Indigenous peoples and the people they're bringing in into civil wars or hatred. So this goes a long way. So we have to see exactly how do we stop this? We can only stop it one legal way, and it's through the CPU, for you to join as a CPU member so that we have some legal standing somewhere, and to be able to sign your Citizens Convention of Consent. It's not just signing Convention of Consent and running away. You need to get everybody you know to sign it, and as many people as you know to join the CPU. If there's ever a year that we need to do this, it is this year. It is this year because the doors are closing, and here's why. So, anyways, I'm going to come back to this during one of our meetings with our members. So, if you're a member, then we'll discuss this tonight at our Tuesday meeting at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So, anyways, I will be doing a screen share here that I want to show you here. And it's about, okay, where is it here? Just trying to see. Okay, this was the CSIS report. Okay, RCMP, there we go. Okay, so found it, and do a screen share. RCMP boss, there we go. And I'm sure you guys seen this in the news. Okay, so I hope you can see this. RCMP boss expresses desire for new law to deal with threats against politicians. Oh, those poor politicians. God forbid they should be doing their job and not be accused of anything when they don't do their job. So anyways, Ottawa RCMP Commissioner Mike Dehamy says he wants the government to look at drafting a new law that would make it easier for police to pursue charges against people who threaten elected officials. The Mounties are seeing an increase in invective directed at politicians, including comments from the same individuals on multiple occasions, Dehamy said in an interview. Now, however, Often the behavior does not meet the criminal code threshold for laying a charge of uttering threats because you have to be specific. Okay. And it has to be, you have to really mean it. And then you also have your right to freedom of expression. So that's sometimes a challenge, Duhemi says. But there are the other tools that, but are there other tools that we can use? Is there anything else that we can add to the criminal code that can address the situation? Duhemi said the RCMP hopes to work with Public Safety Canada and the Department of Justice on the possibility of a new provision to address the phenomenon. No, because you have freedom of expression, and I'll tell you why. At the international level, even our notwithstanding clause would fall in regards to freedom of expression and all of the rights that they're not allowed to derogate from. So being pissed off at our government, that's our right to be able to criticize them. And no, it's not okay to make, death threats and things like that. But at the same time, did the person really mean it? Did they really believe that they were going to actually go and kill that person or whatever, if it was a death threat or whatever? You need to make sure that, you're accusing the right person here or for the right reasons. So anyways, he says, it'd be nice to see if we could look at, it would be nice to see if we could look at that, he said. People feel more free to express what they really think, which is a good thing, but it has to be done in a civil way. Every elected official has a right to feel secure in doing their job. Duhemi's comments came amid growing concerns about the safety of politicians. MPs have been followed on the street and subjected to death threats. So that's not okay. But again, to what level? What did these politicians do? How did they vote in Parliament? Did the person who made the threats, his family die over the nonsense of COVID in the last 4 years? The escalation has prompted efforts to bolster protection and security measures, it says. Yeah, I can see that they'd be afraid, and rightly so, but they need to be doing their jobs. First of all, if they would understand the rights that the people have in Canada, especially at the international level, our International Bill of Rights that Canada and the UK both have signed on to protect, and that they cannot derogate from, is important. And yes, Canada is bound by it legally. So we are protected, but Canada has made certain that none of our, how can I say, governments follow it. That the lawyers don't follow it, that the justice doesn't follow it. So here it says Ontario Liberal MP Pam Damoff recently announced she would not run in the next election, saying the threats and misogyny she has experienced made her fearful of going out in public. And I'm sure justices are just as bad because they've they've done things and made judgments that have nothing to do with law. Now, Duhemi said the RCMP regularly communicates with other police forces about threats to politicians. In addition, the Mounties have a liaison team that keeps in touch with federal ministerial offices about daily security needs, and the force works closely with the House of Commons Sergeant at Arms concerning protection of MPs. The force will sometimes turn to disruption measures, with officers knocking on the door of someone who has made a concerning comment to have a chat with them. So intimidation. Okay, Duhame says. And they're not supposed to be intimidating anybody. So RCMP behavioral science specialists also look at incoming cases. And the force has noticed that disturbing comments sometimes come from people known to the force from early incidents, he added. An intelligence report released in March said threats against politicians have become increasingly normalized due to extremist narratives prompted by personal grievances and fueled by misinformation or deliberate lies. Deliberate lies by who and misinformation by whom? The government, possibly? The politicians, possibly? Public health, possibly? Who is doing the lying and why are people pissed off? There's a reason why people get pissed off. There's a reason why over 5 million people rose in 2022. There's going to be another reason why people will keep rising. Oh, but the government can't touch them. Seriously. So The June 2023 report prepared by a federal task force that aims to safeguard elections said baseless theories, disinformation, and misinformation had spread to larger audiences, exposing online users to a vast network of narratives that undermine science, that they're no longer practicing science, you know, seriously, systems of government, and traditional figures of authority. Now, if we were to follow the science, it did say that, the SARS CoV2 actually cannot produce a good infection. So, what does that tell you for the rest of the 4 years we've suffered? So, that's the science. The science, they proved McMaster's University, the Toronto University, and Sunnybrook Hospital research proved that there was no major infection. Okay. But nobody said a word. So beyond that, I'm going to keep going here. So we have to find out who's doing the lying, who's doing the disinformation, who's doing the misinformation, because that's in black and white, people, what I just told you now. So violent rhetoric routinely fixates on elected officials with particular hostility towards high-profile women, the report says. Seriously. Now, in recent years, countries including Bolivia, Brazil, Tunisia have brought in legislation directed at violence against women in politics. Okay, ensuring that social media platforms are enforcing terms of service that will minimize the sense of violence is important, said Chris Tenoff, Assistant Director of the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions at the University of British Columbia. Well, that's all good. I mean, the women shouldn't be threatened in that sense, but they shouldn't feel they need to be protected in a way, but so do the men, not one more than the other. And a politician's a politician. You took on that job. You need to know what, and if you're not doing that job, or if, see, the problem in Canada is that the people have a different perception of what a politician is, because that's what politicians tell them. So now the recently introduced federal online harms bill is one way of helping establish standards around expectations of such platforms for addressing harassment, threats of hate speech, he said. While much of the abuse comes via cyberspace, it can also spill into the physical realm, Tanov said. So you're getting threats online and there's a protest, so it comes to your home. And you've also been shouted at in a city council meeting, he said. They're quite often mixed together. Tanov added that it is important for party leaders and staff to make it clear to supporters that it's inappropriate and undemocratic for them to threaten or harass opposing political parties online. And it would be good to see more of those public expressions, because that kind of cross-party unity around what's appropriate is really necessary. This report by the Canadian Press was first published May 12, 2024. So this is by Jim Bronskill, the Canadian Press. But again, are these people even talking about human rights and non-derogation of rights and protected rights? Barely in here. No, let's create a law or something that we got to make sure that this doesn't happen. Well, you're going against the people's rights. And the politicians are going against the people's rights. But why? Because Canada is a paradox. Why is Canada a paradox? We're supposed to be one thing. I'm just going to stop sharing here and go back to you here. So Canada is supposed to be a free country. The people are supposed to be free. The people on the the Canada website, it says in Canada, in the Justice website, Canadians make decisions together. We get to make one every 4 years. Seriously? Okay. So paradox. So how do we clean up? How do we fix the paradox? So you have one Canada, two different visions. We have politicians, many different visions. What is a politician supposed to do? Well, a politician is supposed to represent the people. There are representatives. No. Do you know what political parties are? They don't represent the people. They represent the political party. Oh, surprise, surprise. So my video keeps going back and forth. I was supposed to fix that. But anyways, it's unbelievable to what level the corruption is in Canada, and how do we get the changes, and who's going to listen to us? We're going to have to rise by the millions, people, not just 5. It'll have to be 10 to 20 million people right across Canada in every city to be able to be recognized for our rights, and for them to stop imposing their ideology against the peoples and the Indigenous, the Canadian citizens and the Indigenous peoples, and then using migrants and immigrants against each other. It's plain as day. So now I want to show you something else, because this kind of finishes it. But first of all, let's listen to this, okay? And this is from the human rights, because I've written letters to the Senate and to all over the place, saying, hey, you can't bring in Bill C-11, you can't bring in Bill C-63 or 263, and then there's S-210 now coming out. So, we're being snowballed by fraud, by our own governments. They don't even know how to write according to the law, according to the rule of law. We've got all of the definitions for that, which I'm going to make a video eventually in regards to that. Okay. We were able to purchase the list, or to get our hands on the list of all of the words that have been used. And some of the words these words have been used over 2,000 times in our laws, which would render them corruptible. So are they using the right words for the rule of law? No, they're not. Are our laws very specific that anybody can understand them? No, they're not. They're double speak. So the only ones who could make a change in this is we, the people, because our politicians won't. They look like they want to, but from different political parties, every 4 years, 8 years, whatever. Yeah, let's vote for this guy. He's going to save us. And then 6 months down the road to a year, oh, that's a different story. Say anything to get elected. Even point out the truth, and then you're believable, right? Now, I have the benefit of living where Mr. Brock lives, close by anyway. And he said some amazing things, but right now I want to show you something. I'm going to show you the little clip from the Human Rights Commissioner, and it's in regards to the rights that they were not supposed to touch during the pandemic, or during any emergency, or even in a time of war. And this is what Israel has been breaking. So the countries don't care about breaking the laws. So we need to take things into our own hands, politically and legally, in a political sense, legally. So it's up to us. And once we start, then others will follow suit. And then the real judges, the ones who believe in human rights, the true people, will show up. But first, we need to make the first move. We need to show that we are going to have the backs of the ones who want to tell the truth, who want to, do law the right way, where it's fair for everyone. So I'm just going to do another screen share with you here. And where is it here? Oops, there we go. Now share, and this is it. So you'll see that this is our CPU website, and this is a video that we've put for our members. So
that should not be used as a weapon
okay, I'm just going to restart it here.
To quash dissent. COVID-19.
There we go.
Governments are facing formidable challenges to protect people from COVID-19. I'm a physician, I've been Minister of Health, President of the Republic. I know that these kind of measures are needed. But the emergency powers some governments have adopted should not be used as a weapon to quash dissent, control the population, and even perpetuate their time in power. Exceptional measures should be used to cope effectively with the pandemic. Nothing more, nothing less. Under human rights law, states are able to restrict some rights to protect public health. They also have broad powers if a state of emergency is declared. But the restrictions need to be necessary, proportionate to the need, non-discriminatory, and time-limited. Certain rights, including the right to life, the prohibition of torture and ill treatment, and the right not to be arbitrarily detained, can never be set aside under any circumstances. Police and security forces in some countries have used excessive and sometimes lethal force to make people abide the lockdowns and curfews. Shooting someone for breaking a curfew because they are desperately searching for food is clearly unacceptable and unlawful. So it's making it difficult or dangerous for a woman to get to a hospital to give birth. In some cases, people are dying because the way the measures supposedly put in place to save them are being applied. So to help states in the response to COVID-19, the UN Human Rights Office has issued new guidance on exceptional and emergency measures. Our guidance stresses that law enforcement officials should only use force when strictly necessary. Some countries have introduced measures and laws that refer to vaguely defined offenses. Some are detaining people for breaking lockdowns, thereby adding to congestion in prisons. This risks making the pandemic worse. So I'm concerned that such measures and laws may also be used to muzzle the media and detain critics and opponents. It is important to counter misinformation about COVID-19, as this poses a huge risk to people, but so do bad policy decisions. Shutting down the free exchange of ideas and information undermines trust and may damage the effort to contain COVID-19 and its harmful socio-economic effects. We have seen many states adopt justifiable, reasonable, and time-limited measures, but there has been worrying cases where government appeared to be using COVID-19 as a cover for human rights violations, restricting fundamental freedoms from civic space, and undermining the rule of law. Exceptional measures and state of emergency should be independently reviewed and subject to proper and regular parliamentary, judicial, and public oversight. It is clear states need additional power to cope with this crisis, but the abiding principle must be that exceptional measures are enforced humanely. If the rule of law is not upheld, then the public health emergency risks becoming a human rights disaster, and the negative effects will long outlast the pandemic itself.
Yep, and she's absolutely right. One sec here. I'm just going to go and remove that one there. Okay, stop sharing. There we go. And, she's absolutely right. But there's other things too, where online, all of our rights are protected online, freedom of expression. And, there's a fine line between hate speech and threats and things like that. So you need to know, what's good, what's been decided before, what hasn't been decided, same with the from here and other countries. You need to see exactly what came out of those court cases and even at the international level for human rights. So in the United States, again, you can see the pattern where justices over time contradicted each other, and they will use precedents to set their agenda. So you've got a good law, you got a good precedent and a bad precedent that they made so that they can use whichever one they need, right? So, and in Canada, we have a lot of laws that even contradict each other, which should not happen. So a lot of, things are being done that shouldn't be allowed. And if we don't have a justice system that is proper, and that we don't have lawyers who are, lawyers and judges are supposed to uphold, they're supposed to be the protectors of the rule of law and all of these things. If they're not being taught that, then they won't know. So that's our job now. Guess what? We have to educate everybody. Isn't that just sickening? It is. So in order to get our rights, we have to educate everybody, even your and then the job of educating you is your responsibility. And once you do that, then we have to spread it out. So it's not something that could take that long, but if we started at this, primary school level all the way up, there's a country that they started teaching direct democracy to the children of the entire school from kindergarten and up, and it's working great. And they were asked, why did you do this? They said, well, maybe someday they will be strong enough to be able to bring true democracy. So they teach it. And we need to teach that here. And only with you being educated on it can it prosper and move along so that we can teach it all over the place, and with your support. So now we're going to go to actually Mr. Brock, because he's saying everything that I could be saying, and any of you could be saying right now. And it's important for you to see, because we need to make sure that everybody knows his words, and that we make sure that he upholds those words, and that the conservatives that back him up do that. So that respect and stand behind those words forever, not just until the elections, and then not after the elections. But they can change a lot of stuff right now if they wanted to, and not have to wait for elections. And that's one of the most important things that I can stress. I've said it last week, and I'll say it again. They don't need to. Polyev doesn't need to wait till elections to start changing things. There's so much corruption that they can actually do something about it. And now you're going to hear them also talk about the notwithstanding clause. So it's really important, because the notwithstanding clause is supposed to be, he'll say that it's not being used by anybody in Canada right now other than the provinces. The feds have never used it. Why? Because the minute the feds use it, it can be challenged. There could be a constitutional challenge. And yet the feds should have did a constitutional challenge against Doug Ford when he was threatening to use it. And Doug Ford had to backtrack on that because he couldn't use it. Because the only thing that notwithstanding clause does is to remove our rights, the people's rights. Okay? Nobody else's. Our rights. And that's where it's misleading. So we're going to go here, and oops, hang on here. I must have the video somewhere. Right here. Okay. So I'm just going to stop it here.
Consistent.
Just going to bring it one notch here. Okay. Hang on. It switched on me. Oops. A little bit of patience here. Okay, there we go. I hope you can all see that. Okay, you're not seeing it now. Hang on. Hang on. Stop sharing here. And hang on here. Okay. Parle view. Okay, I'm just going to have to redo that for a sec. Studio. Okay, cancel. And then reopen. There we go. Okay, we've got the right one.
And I'll, thank you, Chair, and I'll allow you to be mindful of the clock. I know we have resources till 2 o'clock. I probably have at least 2 hours worth of commentary and material to read out. So that being said, yes, thank you. So I start by sharing I start by sharing the initial commentary from my colleague, Mr. Keurig. Just how disappointed that he was to hear the commentary from Ms. Khalid in terms of the framing of her motion, and how shocked she was and how disturbed she was. You know, the hypocrisy from that member, and quite frankly, the entire Liberal bench on these two issues is just astounding. The lengths they will go to try to change the channel on where public opinion is with the Liberal Party of Canada and their leader, Justin Trudeau. It really speaks to how low they have sunk and the attempts that they will do and try to fearmonger, to frighten and scare Canadians. Pretty much the entire playbook of the Liberal Party of Canada since Justin Trudeau became leader of the party, literally in 2013. It was all about scaremongering. Even before 2013, one can make the argument, going back to the 2004 and 2006 election under PM Martin and Chrétien, the lengths by which they will go to try to paint any leader of the Conservative Party of Canada as a boogeyman. And that Canadians ought to be fearful that there is somehow a hidden agenda, that they will say one thing and quite frankly do another, which really is the playbook of Justin Trudeau and has been since he formed government in 2015. But it's more pronounced now because, let's face it, they're down 20 plus points in the polls. They have been down for well over a year.
Chair.
Go ahead on your point of order.
Just talking about relevance, I'd encourage the member to come back to the topic at hand.
Go ahead,
And
Mr.
relevance
Brock.
is very subjective, as I telegraphed to the party. My speaking remarks are at least 2 hours long. So I will get to relevant points of Ms. Khalid's motion in due course.
Okay, I just wanted to point out something, that what Mr. Brock just said there, that, you know, that it's Justin Trudeau, not the Conservatives. Well, there's plenty of proof that the Conservatives, when they were in power, did the same thing. Okay, so we're just going to make sure that that's covered, because, yeah, maybe not himself there, but in the past, the Conservatives have been just as bad as, well, not as bad as the Liberals right now, but they have been as bad in making sure that they use the double speak. Okay.
Mr. Brock has the floor. Go ahead, Mr. Brock. And I'm not going to accept any interruptions here. We've talked about this many times. Relevance is subjective. Mr. Brock will get to his points and make his points in an appropriate manner, and I don't want any interruptions unless it's related to the actual standing orders, and you can cite those. Go ahead, Mr. Brock.
So before I was interrupted, Chair, I talked about the Liberal Party of Canada's standing amongst the Canadian electorate, and a number of polls have been conducted literally since the day our leader had been elected, and there has been a consistent drive to water down and eliminate that Liberal support. And it's obviously must be extremely disappointing to many longstanding members of the Liberal Party of Canada. It's not surprising that we have a number of ministers who've decided not to run for re-election. We have a number of MPs deciding not to run for re-election. There is a phrase that I'm not going to use, but it's clear that they too look at the polls and they know that public opinion is changing. It's changing for a number of reasons, Mr. Chair. There's always, and always has been, a shelf life for any political party. That applies to the Liberal Party, that applies to the Conservative Party. People get tired of being promised a number of things pre-election merely to buy a vote, and then to be profoundly disappointed when the Prime Minister of the day does not deliver. And that's precisely what's happening with Justin Trudeau. I'm sure he and the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, and the entire Finance Department, if not the entire Liberal bench, thought that the spring budget would finally end some negativity towards their economic policies, that they were going to make it fairer for a number of generations, that it wasn't strictly about the middle class. Now it's fairness for multiple generations. But what are we seeing in the budget? We're seeing the same worn-out talking points that Justin Trudeau promised Canadians in 2015 and completely has not delivered on, particularly in the area, in my view, of public safety. And I'm going to get to relevant points in due course. But it's just indicative, emblematic of why this party and its members are just so desperate to find something other than to take a look at their track record. The budget has fallen flat on its face. One could have made the argument that the Prime Minister was going to drop the writ 2 or 3 weeks ago with his cross-country tour and all his ministers following along and delivering all these little goodies as to what they can expect from the budget. But nothing has moved the channel because Canadians are wise and Canadians are intelligent. And they have finally realized that this Prime Minister, who they thought was going to conduct governance so much more differently. Let's all remember his famous words in 2015, how he would do politics different, that his administration would be known as the most transparent, accountable, and responsible government this country has ever seen. But then you take a look at everything that has transpired. Their non-willingness to provide documents at committee, instructing their members to filibuster when it comes to exposing elements of corruption and unethical behavior. The list goes on and on and on. I could spend hours doing a deep dive, just taking a look at the number of scandals that has rocked Justin Trudeau and members of his cabinet, members of his backbench, literally since 2015. Canadians are wise individuals, Mr. Chair, and they remember these things. So with all the good efforts that the Liberal members of this committee are trying to do now, trying to scare Canadians and fearmonger, in my view, is going to fall flat on its face. Let's take, for instance, this whole concept of the scariness of the notwithstanding clause. The notwithstanding clause, surprise, surprise, introduced by Justin's father himself, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, well over 40 years ago. And that notwithstanding clause in the last 40 plus years has not been amended. It has been in the books for a very long time. And while no federal government has exercised its use, does not necessarily mean, in fact, I'll say definitively, does not mean that it's inappropriate to use it in the future. We know that some provincial premiers have used it. And where was the backlash from Justin Trudeau? Well, I guess there was a little bit of backlash. He talked a good game, but he didn't do anything about it. When Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, talked about it, when the Premier of Quebec talked about it, this is something that is law in this country. And for all the non-lawyers on the Liberal bench, I invite them all to take the time, it'll take you less than 2 minutes, to actually read Section 33 of the Charter. That when used, clearly, and I'm just paraphrasing it, when used, it's not permanent. It's reviewable at 5 years. So when we take a look at the comments recently made by our leader, these are comments, Mr. Chair, that have not changed or been altered in any which way from the first moment that he talked about the applicable use of the notwithstanding clause. The notwithstanding clause, despite the best efforts of Ms. Khalid to try to open up the floodgates and widen the potential abuse of the notwithstanding clause to scare Canadians to be fearful of the use of that clause, because now it might be applied to reproductive rights, is an absolute joke. And it's offensive, because she knows full well, as does every member of that Liberal bench, where the Conservative Party of Canada stands on that issue. Dead stop. No further discussion needed. But that won't stop the Liberals. That will not stop them. They will continue to scare Canadians into believing that Prime Minister Pierre Poilievre, and yes, I will say it with complete confidence, will be Canada's next great Prime Minister, will use it, if he uses it, and when he uses it, will use it for its stated objective. And his stated objective is to correct a lot of things that are happening in our justice system that is really, really disturbing, not only to members of Parliament, but disturbing to Canadians as a whole. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the Bissonnette case, because that really forms the genesis of our discussion.
Okay, I want to stop him right here, because when you watch from the beginning to end this committee session, you will hear, okay, and this is what I talk about doublespeak and confusing everybody, is when the Liberals, okay, doing what they're doing and, trying to bring in the digital ID and all of these things, working against Canadians, and then you hear this young woman talk about, oh my God, they might use, somebody can use the notwithstanding clause against, the right to choose if a woman wants to have a child or have an abortion, things like this. So they're using, I mean, their playbook is unbelievable. Okay. And these people actually believe themselves. So this is how they're coerced into, okay, make this about that, and then we'll discuss it. We're going to get the opposition to question, because they are critics. Okay. On the opposition is the critics to be able to challenge the Liberals right now. So Conservatives and NDP, but NDP now have sided with the Liberals, so they're not there as critics. They're there as supporters of the Liberals. So now you've got the Conservatives trying to really come out and say, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Well, the notwithstanding clause, for me, when I'm listening to the conservatives and especially Larry Brock here saying that, oh, he's going to use it, but he's going to use it to stop the wrong things, the corruption at the justice level that we're seeing, but none of them are doing anything about. Because they could. So could the RCMP. So could CSIS in regards to the WEF. Okay? Interfering in the security of our country, our economic security of our country. So when I'm hearing these people, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm telling you, I wish I had been, but if I had been, I'd probably be disbarred for speaking out because of everything they've done that is illegal in this country since especially 1982 and prior to that. But let's just stay on 1982 because that's when we should have had our rights to collective self-determination, to accept that charter or not, and to impose regulations in regards to our governance, in regards to the politicians, what they can and cannot do. We never got that chance. So to be able to listen to this is a prime example of how Mr. Brock is saying, well, Poilievre is might use the notwithstanding, but for a good reason. That's BS. Okay. At the international level, in regards to our rights, the notwithstanding clause cannot be used. It would not, if it was, it has to be challenged here in Canada, but we can't challenge it until they actually come forward with it. In Quebec, they've been using it, but I can't challenge anything in Quebec. The people have been challenging it in Quebec, but hey, corrupt justices, corrupt government, and they don't even know the law to begin with. So are they really corrupt? They don't know what they're doing. And because they don't know the rights of the people, our rights, they think they're not being corrupted. They're going, in regards, this is how we do things in Canada. BS. In Canada, it's total corruption. That's why we call it a paradox. It's supposed to be good, but the laws are all corrupted, but nobody says anything about it. And, that's how we do law in Canada. But if it were really challenged at the international level under human rights laws that everybody agreed to after World War II, we'd have our rights today. So as long as we allow them to play this game, and are they really that ignorant to the fact of the notwithstanding clause and to think that it's a good thing? No, it's not. Because it just stops our rights. Or they're saying, well, they're going to stop the province from doing that, or the justices from doing that, or no, that notwithstanding clause is like, go and read it properly. It stops our rights. What Trudeau said about the notwithstanding clause, Pierre Elliott and everybody else since then, actually, again, is a misperception, a misconception of what it's supposed to be. So let's really, discuss this. But, I'm not a lawyer, and thank goodness I'm not. I'd hate to be a lawyer today. But I have the right to discuss every time that I talk to you online or anywhere. I'm actually 24/7. My collective and political, my political, civil, and my civil and political rights, okay, collective political and civil rights, are being brought about every time I speak to you, because I exercise that all the time, and it says it on here. We've activated our civil and political rights, and that's at the international level and national level and provincial level and municipal level. We have the right to discuss together amongst ourselves. I have the right to address Canadians. I have the right to address Indigenous nations, because it's all about our rights. We have the right to communicate. We have the right to meet. We have the right to be able to have freedom of speech. We have the right to practice freedom of speech online. But they're trying to stop all this. And other countries are joining in. And then you got the RCMP and CSIS. coming out with reports. I should have talked to you about the CSIS report. You should see that one. Now, if you don't want to be, now everybody's who has hate speech or who they'll claim is you're thinking about hate speech. Now we can go and jail you because you're thinking about hate speech. Things like that. So it's really disturbing to see what's happening and where all of this is going. But anyways, I'm going to actually give you the link to this so that you could actually see it. And because now I'm kind of late for my meeting. So copy. I'm just going to go back here and put this link here for everybody. Okay, so you can see it there. But listen to the entire thing and then tell me how confusing it is, because you kind of see that, the young liberal is doing a good thing. And she sounds so sincere and honest, and she believes everything there. And yes, she's afraid that they use that notwithstanding clause. And then Larry Brock turns around and says, "Oh well, she's afraid for nothing because it's already been determined." Well, the United States, they've overturned things. We're not supposed to overturn any laws and any things that have been decided at the Supreme Court level. But hey, some of those judgments were wrong to begin with. So nothing's for sure. So, normally I love Larry to death. But here, let's see what happens. And does he know about the notwithstanding clause and that it would not survive our rights? Does he know about our rights? Perhaps not, because it was neglected since the 80s. And the justices have lied about it, making the lawyers and the new justices think that, oh, well, yeah, that's okay. That's the law. That's Canada. That's how we do law. So anyways, I'm just going to move it on a bit. I'm going to be late for my French meeting, but I'm just going to keep it going for a minute. There we go.
Discussion regarding the notwithstanding clause. And I want to read an article from the press. This is dated February the 8th, 2019. And this is some of the important words used by the sentencing judge in Quebec before the government decided to appeal. And the heading reads, Quebec City mosque shooter sentenced to at least 40 years in prison. Judge calls Alexandre Bissonnette's attack an unspeakable tragedy that tore apart our social fabric. Bissonnette, who pleaded guilty to killing 6 men at a Quebec City mosque 2 years ago, will be allowed to ask for parole at the age of 67, a judge decided Friday. Bissonnette, 29, will serve an automatic life sentence for shooting and killing the men at the Quebec Islamic Cultural Center on January 29, 2017. He has been behind bars since the shooting. He will be allowed to go before the Parole Board of Canada after serving 40 years, ruled Superior Court Justice Francois Roy, in a decision that left survivors and families feeling disappointed, dismayed, and gutted. I'll go back to those words, Mr. Chair. The judge called Bissonnette's attack an unspeakable tragedy that tore apart our social fabric. During a sentencing hearing that lasted nearly 6 hours, the judge read out parts of his 246-page decision, and I'm sure that members of this committee would not like me to start reading all 246 pages, but I'm certainly happy if necessary, to a packed courtroom describing Bissonnette's actions as premeditated, gratuitous, and abject. His crimes were truly motivated by race and a visceral hatred towards Muslim immigrants, the judge said. Bissonnette was emotionless as the judge read out his decision and was quickly escorted out of the courtroom. After a grueling day, survivors like Said El Amari was visibly upset by the outcome. He choked down tears of anger as he spoke outside the Quebec City courtroom. He said, "Today is a sad day. We are committing 17 orphans to 40 years of suffering, at the end of which they will have to show up again to keep this assassin behind bars. That suffering starts today and will last 40 years. I am floored." Amen Derbali, who was hit by 7 bullets and is now paraplegic, said he almost fainted. He almost fainted when he heard the judge's final decision. "I would have liked to see justice served today," said Derbali. Megda and Amir Belkacemi, who lost their father in the attack, extended their support to the families of the victims of Bruce MacArthur, who was also sentenced today on 8 counts of first-degree murder with a chance of parole in 25 years. Earlier in the day, Justice Holt did a minute-by-minute run-through of the shooting. And it's important that I read this out because I'm going to compare and contrast to the ruling of the Supreme Court of Canada that deemed this cruel and unusual punishment. Armed with a .223 caliber rifle and a 9mm Glock pistol, Bissonnette was carrying 108 bullets when he entered the Islamic Cultural Center, shooting into the crowded prayer room as Sunday prayers were ending. And again, they've identified the names of those that died, and then 5 others were critically injured. Bissonnette pleaded guilty in March 2018 to 6 counts of first-degree murder, 5 counts of attempted murder for the men he wounded, and a 6th count of attempted murder for the 35 people present that night, including 4 children. Both the Crown and Bissonnette's lawyers said they have to review the lengthy sentencing decision and would not be commenting. While first-degree murder carries an automatic life sentence, the judge had to decide how long Bissonnette would have to wait before he would seek parole. We all know in 2011, Stephen Harper's Conservative government adopted Article 745.51 to the Criminal Code, which allows a judge to impose consecutive rather than concurrent periods of parole ineligibility for multiple murders. And for the Canadians who are watching these proceedings, and I'm really glad that we are public and not in camera, because Canadians deserve to hear this. Consecutive means just that there was a potential that Bissonnette could have served 25 years for the intentional, premeditated killing of each member of that mosque. 25 times 7. He would have died in prison. He would have been carried out in a box. Concurrent is the opposite. In essence, what the Supreme Court of Canada has done is it's granted legal license to mass murderers, telegraphing to all mass murderers that regardless of the number of victims, regardless how you kill those victims, regardless of your background, you have got a license to mass murder innocent civilians in this country, and you will serve a maximum of 25 years before you're eligible for a chance at parole. Because the wisdom of those 9 judges, not too far from here, at the Supreme Court of Canada, deemed that having a life sentence, that really means a life sentence. These are the words that had been entrenched in the Criminal Code of Canada for decades. A life sentence. Our learned judges of the Supreme Court of Canada found that 40 years, Mr. Chair, not 25 times 7 years, I'll quickly do the math, 35, 175 years. That 40 years was cruel and unusual because it denied this animal, this mass murdering animal, the opportunity to re-victimize every single family member and extended family member of the 7 people that he killed. That I find, as a member of the Ontario Bar, profoundly disappointing. Absolutely profoundly disappointing. I had to think about the Bissonnette decision, Mr. Chair, when I was a member of the Justice Committee. And we were studying victims' rights. It was coincidental at that time, the Bissonnette decision, the Supreme Court of Canada was released. And we invited 2 victims during one particular day of our study. And these victims, I wish I had the transcript so I could actually share the extremely profound language that they used, but their appearance at justice was perhaps a week to 2 weeks following the release of that decision. And I remember one case in particular. I don't know if any members of this committee remember the case, but the accused, now the convicted murderer, was a man by the name of Dylan Millard. And he and another co-accused, also a convicted murderer, decided to answer an ad for a gentleman, a young father who recently got married and had a young family and lived in a rural part of just outside of the city of Hamilton, Ontario. He answered an ad for the sale of the victim's pickup truck. And this is probably a warning to Canadians as a whole, and I'm sure that people are taking appropriate precautions as a result of what happened in this particular case. So the 2 killers arrive at the residence of the victim, and at the time he's holding his baby, a baby that has been denied the opportunity to really know her father. She literally was under, I think, 1 year of age at the time. And they pulled up, and what they did was actually, which should have been a red flag in hindsight. But whatever vehicle they used, or whether they were dropped off at the residence of the victim, they ultimately walked up his driveway. It was a fairly long driveway. And they said we were interested in following up on your ad for the sale of your truck.
Mr. Brock?
Yes?
I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to cut you off.
I'm very disappointed in that,
I'm
Chair.
sorry,
because
we've run out of resources.
This is a great story I wanted to share.
I am adjourning the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, excuse that, Amy.
Okay. 1 second here. Trying to get rid of that. Okay. I'm back. So, anyways, it stops right there. And the reason why I want to stop you right there is, well, it's Larry wasn't able to continue, but it just goes to show you that what he was going to continue telling you is that these guys were going to buy the pickup truck and then they shot him. But anyways, the whole point of that is that that session, okay, was supposed to be about um, misinformation and all of these things. And the thing is with Larry, um, it's he says a lot of good things, a lot of good points, okay, and he was a prosecutor. But at the same time, we've seen this year after year after, like, between the different parties, and they really put up a good fight, and he'd say, oh yeah, they're going to be good once they get elected, right? Then you get all excited. Well, my whole point of this is that, yeah, he's right about, consecutive. It shouldn't be just, okay, they can kill how many they want and then the same sentence. No, that's not right. And it shouldn't be considered as cruel and unusual punishment for murdering mass people. But that's neither here nor there. My whole point of this was for you to see that, are we going to hold our breath to see who's going to change what? Or are we going to take matters into our own hands, sign your Citizens Convention of Consent, join the Canadian People's Union, and actually we have to rise together by the millions across this country under our legal rights. And the only way to do that legally is to really instill the rule of law, not the rule by law, which is what they're doing now. It's no longer under the rule of law, it's the rule by law. And when we record these people like Larry or any parliamentarian that makes a debate, well, hey, here's the video. Do you remember saying this? Now, do you stand behind your words? And that's the whole problem here, is that, oh, well, I'm going to do this once I'm elected. And then they don't do it. Stephen Harper might have been good for that. The Conservatives might have been good for this case here. But at the same time, they also came out with a law where they can deport any Indigenous person in Canada to the United States or anywhere else. What gives the Canadian government or Stephen Harper the right to remove a First Nations person, an Indigenous person of Canada or North America, to say, hey, we're throwing you out of this country? Like, the stuff that's been going on is just mind-blowing. And we need to take the power into our hands, because right now, like I said at the beginning, over 170 executives get to meet with CSIS. Executives get to meet, they employ over 50% of the Canadian population. Well, heck, I thought that was our government. you know, um, who gets to reap the rewards of our natural resources? The people get to be enslaved by these executives and these big corporations to, okay, you be happy with so much an hour and you live your little life and don't say anything, because I'm going to pocket all the money for my investors and myself. And I'm using your natural resources. That belongs to all of us people and the Indigenous nations. Every Canadian citizen and Indigenous person in Canada is allowing these governments to steal our rights. Doesn't matter who is the parliament of the day. They've been denying us our rights since 1982, for sure. For sure. It's up to you to help us change that. So I'm going to come back in French in about at 11. Unfortunately, 11:30. I'm going to take just a few minutes there to switch everything over. But anyways, thanks for listening. And for Larry, it was long, but I wanted you to see the difference there. He seems to be, on the ball there, but at the same time, promoting the notwithstanding clause, he needs some education, and he needs some education fast. And I'll be speaking to his office about that this week, and hopefully we'll be able to get something done and get him to comment on that. Okay, because I'd like to challenge him to that. So, Larry, let's discuss the notwithstanding clause. Okay. So, anyways, it shouldn't even exist. Especially in Quebec, and Quebec's been using it. So, long story there. But if you read my letter to the senators from for Bill C-11, you're going to see it all in there and why and the proof. So now it's just up to Canadians to stand up to the corruption, and the way we stand up to the corruption is legally through our civil and political rights, and to be able to exercise it properly. But we can't. The CPU can't do anything at all without a lot of Canadians supporting us and standing by us right across the country. We need to stand up by the millions, people. And it's the only way we're going to get this done. Okay. At least if we can start with a few 100,000, we'd be laughing, because that would make a huge impact. And we need to really scare those politicians the proper way, the legal way, where, hey, federal government has a limit, provincial governments have limits too, as well as municipal. We hold the power, not them. Okay. So the CPU.ca, go and sign your Citizens Convention of Consent, join the CPU, and you can join us for our meeting this evening at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you. Bye-bye. On revient à 11h30 en français. Je m'excuse pour le délai. Bye-bye. Okay, just one more. Okay.
Dive into 2024 with the CPU's dynamic campaign, set to energize Quebec and Ontario by reaching 75,000 homes with our empowering message. Every contribution you make is pivotal, driving this ambitious initiative forward and ensuring our information lands directly in communities via Canada Post. We extend special thanks to our dedicated CPU members, whose grassroots efforts amplify our reach. This campaign is your gateway to being part of a significant movement for change. Whether you choose to donate or volunteer, your participation is key to our success. Join us in making 2024 a victorious year for collective freedom and community action with the CPU.